The Simpsons predicted Trump's presidency in 2000. On the 19th of March, 2000, 16 years before it actually happened, a sitcom told America who its next president would be, not as a vague guess dressed up afterward to look impressive, as a specific, named, documented prediction delivered in a throwaway line during a cabinet meeting scene. The episode is Bart to the Future. Bart receives a vision of his adult life. His sister Lisa has become president of the United States, and in her first cabinet meeting, she references inheriting a catastrophic budget deficit from her predecessor. The name, she says, is President Trump. The episode aired in 2000, when Donald Trump was flirting with a Reform Party presidential run that virtually every political commentator dismissed as a publicity stunt with no realistic future. Writer Dan Greeny said afterward that the choice wasn't random or coincidental. He described Trump's presidency as the logical last stop before the country hit bottom, the natural endpoint of a specific cultural trajectory the writing room had been tracking for years. He called it a warning to America, dressed up as a joke. 16 years later, the warning came true. The week after the 2016 election, the show's recurring chalkboard gag read 4 words: "Being right sucks." And in 2022, producer Al Jean noted on social media that the show had originally predicted 2024 as the year, matching the election cycle Trump actually won. The show also depicted Lisa wearing a purple pantsuit and white pearls in the same episode, an outfit so specifically similar to what Kamala Harris wore at the 2021 inauguration that the show's own writers acknowledged the parallel publicly. A comedy writing room pitching a joke about an absurd future built a prediction so precise it named the year, the candidate, and the outfit of the person who ran against him. Friends predicted Facebook 1 year early. Friends ended its 10-season run in 2004. The same year, Mark Zuckerberg launched Facebook from a Harvard dorm room, but the show got there first. In March 2003, more than a year before Facebook existed, an episode called The One with the Memorial Service aired on NBC and featured Ross Geller discovering a website built exclusively for college students where alumni could connect with each other, update their status, and let their networks know what they were up to. The episode stages this as a comedic subplot, Ross using the fictional site to stage his own death and see which friends would attend his memorial. The casual throwaway nature of the premise is exactly what makes it compelling as a prediction. The writers weren't imagining a revolutionary social media platform. They were describing something so obvious and inevitable that they used it as a vehicle for a completely unrelated joke. Facebook launched in February 2004 specifically as a Harvard-only network before expanding to other universities, exactly matching the college-exclusive structure the Friends episode depicted. It wasn't open to the general public until September 2006. The show described a product that didn't exist yet, with enough structural accuracy that the only missing detail was the name. When Facebook's actual cultural dominance became undeniable, the episode resurfaced, and the parallel was documented widely enough that multiple television historians have cited it as one of the most precisely timed technological predictions in sitcom history. The show, about 6 friends in New York, accidentally described the platform that would eventually replace the way those kinds of friendships were maintained. The Simpsons predicted the Disney-Fox merger in 1998. In 1998, an episode of The Simpsons included a single background shot, a sign on a studio building that read 20th Century Fox, a division of Walt Disney Co. At the time of broadcast, this was fiction layered on fiction, a joke about the kind of corporate consolidation happening in entertainment during the late 1990s. Treated as a throwaway visual gag, the show expected audiences to read and forget. 19 years later, in 2017, Disney announced its intention to acquire 21st Century Fox, the parent company of 20th Century Fox. The transaction was completed in 2019 for approximately $71 billion. The exact corporate relationship the show depicted in a background sign nearly 2 decades earlier became literal, legal, and real. This wasn't a broad prediction about the general direction of corporate consolidation that could be retrofitted as accurate. It was a specific structure, Fox as a subsidiary of Disney, named specifically, displayed in a clearly visible background detail in an episode about the entertainment industry, produced 21 years before the actual acquisition closed. The irony that completed the prediction is the one nobody in 1998 could have anticipated. Once Disney acquired Fox, they owned the show that predicted the merger. The corporation that purchased the prediction now broadcasts it. Every time The Simpsons airs on a Disney-owned platform, the joke from 1998 is running in the background of the institution it described, before that institution existed. 30 Rock named Harvey Weinstein in 2012. In 2012, 5 years before Harvey Weinstein's crimes became public knowledge and resulted in one of the most significant criminal prosecutions in entertainment industry history, a sitcom named him directly. In a 30 Rock episode, Jenna Maroney, played by Jane Krakowski, casually mentions that Harvey Weinstein sexually harassed her on multiple occasions. The line is delivered as a throwaway, a quick, dark joke about the entertainment industry's open secrets, and the episode moves on immediately without dwelling on it. When Weinstein's actual crimes became public in October 2017, generating the reporting that sparked the Me Too movement and eventually resulted in his criminal conviction, the 30 Rock clip resurfaced immediately. Viewers who had watched the episode in 2012 and registered it as a dark industry joke suddenly understood that it was never a joke at all. The show's creator, Tina Fey, who spent years working in the entertainment industry before 30 Rock, was connected to the same professional environment Weinstein had been operating in for decades. The theory the clip confirmed was the one people had been circling for years before the reporting finally arrived. Weinstein's behavior was known within the industry long before it was documented publicly. It was referenced in jokes, in casual conversations, in the specific kind of humor that surfaces when the truth is too dangerous to say directly. 30 Rock didn't predict a future scandal. It documented a present reality that the rest of the world wasn't ready to hear in 2012. The prediction was really just honesty, with a 5-year delay. Scrubs predicted where bin Laden was hiding. After the September 11 attacks, the American intelligence community spent years and billions of dollars attempting to locate Osama bin Laden. The dominant public assumption, repeated across virtually every mainstream news outlet and government briefing, was that bin Laden was hiding in remote mountain caves along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, moving constantly, avoiding population centers. This assumption turned out to be wrong. In 2011, Navy SEAL Team 6 found him living in a compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, a populated city near Islamabad, not in a cave. A hospital sitcom had already told you this. In a 2007 episode of Scrubs, a joke placed bin Laden hiding specifically in the geographic region near Abbottabad, a populated area near major Pakistani infrastructure, rather than in the remote cave network the entire international intelligence community was focused on. The show delivered this as a quick, throwaway joke in a scene with no connection to geopolitical analysis. The writers were working from military analysis available in public reporting at the time, the same pattern recognition anyone with access to open-source intelligence could have applied. But the specific accuracy of the location, a populated Pakistani city rather than a remote cave, 4 years before the actual raid confirmed it, placed the show significantly ahead of the official intelligence apparatus publicly claiming to track the same person. A comedy about a teaching hospital was closer to the truth than the CIA's publicly stated position. The joke nobody remembered until 2011 turned out to be the most accurate geographic assessment of bin Laden's location produced by any American media outlet between 2001 and 2011. The Simpsons predicted the Osaka flu pandemic in 1993. In 1993, a Simpsons episode called Margin Chains opened in a Japanese factory where a sick worker coughed into boxes of products being shipped to Springfield. Weeks later, the entire town fell ill with what the show called the Osaka flu. As Springfield's panic escalated, residents overwhelmed the medical system, ignored official guidance, and in their desperation for a cure, knocked over a truck and accidentally released a swarm of killer bees into the streets. Civil unrest spread through the town as a direct consequence of public fear and government mishandling of the outbreak. In early 2020, a respiratory illness that originated overseas triggered a global pandemic. Public panic produced shortages and misinformation. The medical system was overwhelmed in cities across the world simultaneously. Scientists confirmed the discovery of Asian giant hornets, capable of killing humans with a small number of stings, found in the United States for the first time during the same months the pandemic was spreading. Civil unrest spread across the country that same year. The episode's original writer pushed back publicly against the comparison, stating the parallel was coincidental and deeply uncomfortable to watch get repurposed online. But the discomfort doesn't erase the timeline. A show produced a single half-hour episode in 1993 that combined pandemic, public panic, killer insects arriving from Asia, and civil unrest into one narrative. All four happened in the same calendar year, 27 years later. The joke about an Asian flu arriving in product shipments, aired 3 decades before the specific pattern it described, became the defining event of a generation. Arrested Development predicted Trump's border wall in 2013. Before Donald Trump made a wall along the United States-Mexico border, one of the defining promises of his 2016 presidential campaign, before the proposal became a centerpiece of years of congressional battles and a symbol of an entire political era, a canceled sitcom about a dysfunctional wealthy family built its season 4 plot around it. In 2013, Arrested Development returned to Netflix after years off-air and introduced a storyline in which the Bluth family attempts to profit from building a wall along the Mexican border, treating the construction project as a business opportunity rather than a political statement. The show staged the concept as satire, deploying it against the Bluth family's specific brand of oblivious, self-serving political maneuvering. It was not presented as a prediction of actual government policy. It was presented as the kind of scheme only a family as ethically compromised and politically tone-deaf as the Bluths would seriously pursue. 3 years later, Trump announced his candidacy on a platform that included the border wall as a central promise, spent 4 years attempting to fund and build it, and generated years of political conflict that the Arrested Development storyline had already staged as a family comedy subplot. The show's creator, Mitch Hurwitz, acknowledged the parallel publicly after the election, noting that the writers were working from existing political conversations rather than making predictions. The wall concept was already circulating in political rhetoric in 2013. What Arrested Development did was treat it as something only a delusional, corrupt family would actually pursue. Reality eventually confirmed the assessment. Parks and Recreation predicted the Cubs World Series win. The Chicago Cubs had not won a World Series championship since 1908, a drought so historically extended that it had become one of sports culture's most reliable shorthand references for impossible things. In 2015, the final season of Parks and Recreation featured a storyline in which the Cubs win the World Series, a moment the show staged as a future event significant enough to use as a cultural reference point in a flash-forward sequence depicting the characters' lives years after the show's present-day timeline. The show aired this prediction in 2015. In 2016, the Cubs won the World Series for the first time in 108 years, defeating the Cleveland Indians in Game 7. The prediction landed within 1 year of the episode that staged it. Parks and Recreation creator Michael Schur confirmed the Cubs' win was a deliberate, creative choice rather than an accidental coincidence, a decision the writing room made specifically because the Cubs' century-long drought felt like the kind of absurd, long-awaited event their optimistic show should celebrate in its vision of the future. The prediction's precision wasn't supernatural. It was the writers backing a team they believed was building towards something based on their roster development and farm system strength in 2014 and 2015. But the timing, a prediction staged in a series finale that came true within 12 months of broadcast, made it one of the most cited sports predictions in sitcom history. A show about local government optimism accidentally became the most accurate Cubs forecast produced by any television program. Family Guy named Kevin Spacey in 2005. In 2005, a Family Guy episode called Don't Make Me Over included a scene in which Stewie Griffin runs through a mall shouting that he has escaped from Kevin Spacey's basement. The joke aired 12 years before Kevin Spacey's career collapsed in October 2017, following allegations of sexual misconduct that began with an accusation from actor Anthony Rapp and expanded significantly in the weeks that followed. When Spacey's name became connected to a major public scandal, the 2005 clip surfaced immediately and spread rapidly. Viewers who had registered it as a random celebrity reference at the time suddenly understood it as part of a pattern documented in multiple places across the entertainment industry before any formal accusation was ever made public. The parallel to the Harvey Weinstein situation that emerged the same month also referenced years earlier in a sitcom, confirmed something the resurfacing of both clips seemed to suggest simultaneously. Both Weinstein and Spacey's behavior were known within specific industry circles well before any formal public reckoning arrived. The Family Guy clip and the 30 Rock clip weren't predictions in the conventional sense. They were documentation of existing knowledge, surfaced through the only available channel that could carry it without triggering immediate legal response. Comedy, specifically the kind of dark, fast-moving comedy that could be dismissed as absurdist humor by anyone who needed to dismiss it. Both shows named people the industry knew about, both did it in jokes, and both waited more than a decade for the rest of the world to catch up. The Jetsons predicted smartwatches and video calls. In 1962, The Jetsons premiered in 1962. Set in a version of the 2060s populated by technology, the show's writers imagined as a century away from the world they were living in. Several of those imagined technologies arrived considerably ahead of schedule. The show depicted flat-screen televisions mounted on walls in a decade when household televisions were large, heavy, box-shaped units that required significant furniture accommodation. Flat-screen technology became a mainstream consumer product in the 2000s, roughly 40 years ahead of the show's intended timeline. The show depicted wrist-worn devices that displayed information, communicated wirelessly, and performed functions indistinguishable from what the Apple Watch and its competitors do now. Described in a children's cartoon as a casual, unremarkable accessory rather than a revolutionary technological achievement. Video calling, depicted throughout the show as the standard method of communication between characters, was not available as a consumer technology until decades after the show aired, and did not become genuinely mainstream until the smartphone era enabled it without specialized equipment. The show also depicted robotic household assistants, performing domestic tasks, a technology that remains in development but has produced commercially available versions through companies like iRobot and more recent AI-integrated home systems. None of these predictions required supernatural foresight. They required the simple application of existing technological trajectories extended forward in time by people paid to imagine futures plausibly. The show's writers were not predicting, they were extrapolating. The fact that their extrapolations were largely correct is less about the Jetsons being prophetic and more about the trajectories being visible to anyone paying close enough attention in 1962. Arrested Development predicted reality TV families. In 2003, years before the Kardashian family became the defining example of a media empire built entirely around being famous for being famous, before keeping up with a specific family became a cultural phenomenon that generated billions in revenue and reshaped reality television into something unrecognizable from its earlier documentary format. Arrested Development staged the entire concept as a satirical joke about a delusional, dysfunctional wealthy family who believed their lives were interesting enough to film. The show premiered in 2003. The same year, reality television was beginning its significant cultural expansion, but before the specific fame as product model had fully crystallized into the form it would eventually take. Arrested Development's Bluth family pursued media attention, staged moments for cameras, monetized their own dysfunction, and consistently overestimated the public's interest in their internal drama in ways that were presented as specific symptoms of their collective delusion. The show's satire was aimed at a type of family that the culture hadn't fully produced yet in the specific form the Bluths were mocking. Within a few years, that type of family existed, was enormously successful, and was operating with such cultural dominance that the satire Arrested Development had staged began looking less like comedy and more like a blueprint that someone had actually followed. The show predicted not just that this model would exist, but that it would be built around a family defined by wealth, internal conflict, public dysfunction, and an absolute conviction that their own story was worth watching, regardless of whether anyone had asked them to tell it. The Simpsons predicted Apple Vision Pro. In 2016, an episode of The Simpsons called Friends and Family depicted characters wearing mixed reality headsets that overlaid digital information onto their physical environment, allowing them to inhabit an augmented version of the world around them while remaining physically present in their actual surroundings. The show staged this technology as a social commentary device, characters using the headsets to replace their real environment with preferred digital alternatives, a satirical observation about escapism and technology's role in allowing people to avoid engaging with physical reality. In January 2024, Apple announced and began shipping the Vision Pro, a mixed reality headset retailing at approximately $3,000 that overlays digital content onto the physical environment in exactly the way the episode depicted. The device's launch was accompanied by widespread cultural commentary about whether people would use expensive technology to retreat from reality rather than enhance their engagement with it. The exact satirical point the 2016 episode had made. Producer Al Jean commented on the parallel directly after the Vision Pro launch, acknowledging the connection without claiming it was deliberate prediction rather than coincidental alignment. The show's consistent record of this kind of technological alignment prompted its own producers to develop a fairly precise theory about how it keeps happening. They throw enough darts that some of them hit, but the Vision Pro parallel is specific enough, the satirical point accurate enough, and the timing close enough that dismissing it as pure coincidence requires ignoring both the image and the cultural observation the image was making. Seinfeld predicted the rideshare economy. In 1995, in a season 6 episode of Seinfeld, Kramer launches an informal car service operating out of his own vehicle, picking up strangers, charging them for rides, and operating entirely outside any conventional taxi or transportation regulatory framework. The episode plays Kramer's scheme as another of his characteristically impractical, self-important entrepreneurial disasters, the kind of idea that sounds plausible enough to attempt and collapses quickly enough to provide a single episode's worth of comedic momentum. The scheme is treated as funny, specifically because the audience in 1995 was expected to find the premise of a private citizen operating an informal pay-per-ride car service obviously impractical and slightly absurd. 17 years later, Uber launched in San Francisco and then expanded globally, building a multi-hundred-billion-dollar industry around exactly the model Kramer's scheme had staged as a joke. A private citizen operating their own vehicle, picking up strangers, charging for rides, functioning entirely outside the existing taxi regulatory framework. The show's own writers couldn't have been building a prediction. The technology that makes ride-sharing practical, specifically smartphone GPS and payment processing, didn't exist in 1995. What they built was a satirical observation about a specific kind of entrepreneurial thinking, the belief that any regulated service could be improved by simply removing the regulation and replacing professional infrastructure with personal initiative. That thinking turned out to be both the joke Seinfeld was making and the actual business model that became one of the most disruptive companies in transportation history.